Our group read the book Teaching Boys Who Struggle in School by Kathleen Palmer Cleveland. Today we will discuss our opinions and thoughts about why boys struggle in school and the strategies we can use to help them.
Yeah, thank you. The first chapter of the book really discusses what the problem is. Is the problem boys against girls? Are we treating girls differently than boys? Is that why they aren't succeeding as well as the girls? And I actually read an article that said that was the reason why, that men have more spatial intelligence, that they're more kinesthetic, that we need to have practices that meet them where they're at as males because our seat work, the things we do in class, focus more on the female brain of multitasking and of linguistics, and that's just not how boys learn. However, in the book, Cleveland seems to say that this is not the case, that we just have to meet people where they're at. She actually says that it is more of a cultural issue, that in our culture we have what is known as the boy code. And the boy code will basically say that that a young man does not believe that it is masculine to learn, that he looks in the media and sees men who are shooting people up and who are police officers and firefighters and do very physical jobs, and they think it's very feminine to just sit and read a book. And that's really why that they don't want to learn in school, is because of the boy code. And the boy code also restricts their emotions, so they're very, very distracted trying to hold in their emotions. I actually read another article in which it discussed young black males and the lack of a father figure in that community, and they would do Power Mondays, in which they would have a man come in and present the material to them and showed that academics were masculine. So she basically says the opposite of what the first article I discussed says. She says that this is a cultural issue. It has to do with the boy code.
I totally agree with that, Brittany. I also, in one of the articles I looked at, it also talked a lot about restrictive gender roles in boys and how the media portrays men, and that they're often always portrayed as masculine, and they hardly show any emotions. So also in the first chapter, Cleveland introduces 4 different learning styles or approaches that are that were completed by J. Robert Hansen and Thomas Dewing. These learning styles are sensing and thinking, practical doers; intuitive thinking, thinkers and knowers; sensing, feeling, interpersonal; intuitive feeling, and self-expressive. So in the book it also mentions that the percentages of these students that are at risk. For sensing, thinking, practical doers, 12% of the population are at risk. For intuitive thinking knowers, there's only 1% at risk. For sensing, feeling, interpersonal, there's 63% at risk. And for intuitive feeling and self-expressive, there's only 24% at risk.
Wow.
So it's obvious that the interpersonal learners are significantly more at risk than the other learning styles. These are the thinkers that more like enjoy interaction with people and care more about the experience really than they do following any procedures that they have to do learning. And so I think this goes right along with that, in that it may not be solely just the style, but the combination of the gender and the style together. Boys who are also interpersonal learners but aren't allowed to show their emotions in schools, and so they struggle more with learning and may just shut down instead of learning in the classroom.
Because they're naturally feelers, and the boy code does not allow that.
Right, yes. So I think, what are some of the factors that contribute to this underachievement, and what are some ways that we can provide strategies to fix this ongoing problem and prevalent issue?
That's a good question.
Well, I think you all have hit on a lot of the factors that cause boys to be underachievers, such as like the culture of it being, uncool or things like that, to want to learn and to want to do things such as writing and reading. I actually read an article about the effect of like the uncool influence on boys to learn, and how they look to their peers because there's a lack of male role models where they are really enjoying learning and they're enjoying that process. And when they look to their peers are also following those male role models where they are not learning and they don't see it as a cool thing to do, and so therefore it just makes the problem worse. As far as strategies go, though, there's actually a lot of things that teachers can do. The entire second half of Cleveland's book was dedicated to what she called the pathways of re-engagement. And she had a few verbs like support and guide and reinforce, adjust, ignite, and empower that really, each one of those verbs got a chapter, and each chapter was dedicated to just discussing the way that verb and the way the teacher implemented that verb would help the boys to learn better. And everything tied back into support, which was the first word that she mentioned. Basically, boys don't always feel safe enough in their learning environment to want to engage with the material because, like we mentioned, it is against the culture of today for them to want to learn things along the lines of literacy. And so the most important thing a teacher can do is to build a trusting relationship with the student to help them break down that code, at least within the confines of the classroom, so that they feel open to learn. She talked about, maybe being almost like a leader-coach model where you lead by example, and that's kind of like Brittany stated, where they brought in like Power Mondays, where they brought in the male figures. If you bring in a male figure who can help you, present the material, or show videos of male figures who, help you present the material, it becomes a little more relevant for the boys in your classroom.
And it can be really a bad issue because most of our teachers are females.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, she also talked, about like guiding them through the process and, really being open to communication with them and helping to understand, helping yourself understand as well as helping them to understand the ways that they want to learn and can learn better. She talked about reinforcing the way that they learn, because many times boys have been made to feel like failures in the classroom.
Right.
And so reinforcing the successes they do have and pushing them to achieve more. She talked about adjusting. This was a big one she talked about. Adjusting the environment for the learners. She talked about, the boys need more physical activity than girls do. And so incorporating that into the lesson plan. They need social interaction. Typically the talkative ones in the class are going to be your boys. And so incorporating that into the lesson, they need a reduction of visual and auditory distractions. They're typically the ones that are going to get off task. Right. So really making sure that when you're presenting things, for it to be streamlined, so that they can focus on the material that you are presenting. And she also talked about a need for physical comfort. So once again, just, finding ways to incorporate that into your classroom and into your lesson.
And so many of our boys get so overwhelmed that they just need that physical comfort. I saw that really interesting part where she said that she would put a rocking chair at the back of the classroom and a weighted vest to help them to relieve.
Right, and I think even like flexible seating for our students, that they can move around the room to do
and
their work.
Encouraging that, doing lessons where they can get up and move and are encouraged to get up and move.
Right.
She talked about like igniting their love for learning as well. I read a couple articles that kind of went along with this and kind of went along with the adjusting component as well, where they talked about doing things for boys outside of the traditional classroom setting. Like one article talked about how they had constructed a workshop for boys for writing, and how the only people allowed in were boys, and because of that fact, in that environment, it was no longer seen as not masculine to write, because everyone there was being forced to write, and because everyone there was a male, they had no one to default to. They all had to do their best, and they all gained something from it, and they all came away with a deeper love of writing. I also read another one about where they talked about incorporating like graphic novels or things of that nature into the classroom, just so that you keep the boys engaged in the content area, maybe through a medium that the girls might not find as enjoyable.
And that's really great because, a lot of our graphic novels, they have a picture to go along with it. And that can really help them to comprehend it if they're having issues reading, which could add to their feelings of success, which can really help them to move forward.
I think that's so empowering, too, for the boys, and those are so many strategies that can overcome some of the boundaries of the boy code that have set that they provides opportunities for them to overcome those struggles.
Exactly. And then the last component that she talked about was empowering them. She says that as teachers, we don't see what we're not looking for. And so if you are looking for them to fail, that's what you're going to see. And if you're not looking for them to succeed, you're not going to see it. She also talked about the fact that once the label is given, we seldom question how they came to have that label. So if you have a student and a teacher the previous year tells you that they are a certain way, you're going to take them at their word, and you're not necessarily going to think about, well, why do they think they're this way?
Right.
And so she talked about, really being open to the fact that you need to have an open mind and know that the boys are capable of learning for sure, and that they want to learn, and just it's your job to find ways that they can be engaged in the material.
And I'm sure that a lot of the preconceived notions of people has to do with differing personality types, right?
Right. Yes.
Yeah. She talked about that we can't expect skilled performance without adequate and appropriate opportunities for practice. So a lot of times we present the material and then we expect them to be able to regurgitate it, and kind of like you were talking about, if that's not their learning style, if they cannot just hear it and then do it again, it's going to be very difficult for them. And so we have to provide them with opportunities to practice, opportunities to grow, and opportunities for us to reinforce their small successes so that they feel comfortable enough to continue to learn.
Right. I think she talked a lot about performance-based, really problem-based learning that was very interactive.
She did, yeah. And then she said, the mode of practice must support the desired skill if the aptitude is going to develop to its fullest potential, which is exactly what you were just talking about, how, the skills we're teaching in our classrooms are supposed to have real-world applications, and if we don't allow an opportunity for them to be applicable in the real world, then they lose their relevance for our students. She kind of closed off the book with a list of some of the, the growing, what maybe some of the problems were that we talked about at the beginning, that there is a growing absence of positive role models, and I think we touched on that and talked about the importance of finding male role models who are a positive influence. She talked about the media and how its influence has caused this, hyper-masculine image to become the norm. And she talked about the fact that in our classrooms we need to learn to, or teach them to debunk that and to know that that is not the only way you can grow to be a successful person. They talked about how an understanding exists that boys who follow the code do not enjoy literacy, and I think that we talked about, doing things like a writing workshop and things like that can help them see that writing is for everyone. And then they also have that fear, as all middle schoolers do, of being labeled different. So we really want to work to go against that.
I think that's great. In closing, I'm going to provide an example that I really enjoyed that Cleveland gave in her book. She said that the big picture of underachievement is like a mosaic. When you look closer to the picture, it's all the faces of middle school boys that are struggling in different ways. And then if you look even closer at those pictures, you can see that each boy is also their own mosaic. They all learn in different ways, and we need to provide those different strategies for them that we can meet their educational needs better.